Jonathan Harker naturally just sits up and he's completely startled. He says, "Who are you? Who? Oh, what?" And then the women go, "Shh, shh, shh," almost in unison. And the middle woman, we're just going to call her Middley. Middley steps forward and she just puts her hand, which is a very long, slender finger, to her like this, and says, "Oh, don't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of with us. We're actually very pleasant, lovely ladies. In fact, we think that you are lovely. And what better way to celebrate loveliness than with a kiss?" And Jonathan Harker, hearing this, it's just so creepy and soft, but also at the same time compelling. It's almost as if he's in a dream and his heart is beating faster. And the Middley comes closer to him and closer to him. Her lips start to get close to hers, and she sticks out her tongue and licks her lips. And he feels this extraordinarily strange opposite magnetic sensation of extreme want, almost like just this insatiable desire to kiss this middle lady. Even though she has no idea who she is, he has no idea where she came from, she has this weird, unearthly beauty to her. But at the same time, underneath that desire is this unspeakable abhorrence towards her, this resistance, this feeling of whatever you do, do not go near her. Almost instinctual danger sense that is just whoop, whoop, whoop going off in his mind. And it's almost as if it is like a poisonous wasp covered in honey. Both the sweet and the bitter are just so intricately combined that Jonathan Harker's brain is just back and forth and back and forth. But she is not back and forth. Middley continues to get closer and closer to Jonathan. Her mouth just seems right up next to his, and he can feel her breath. It seems like rose-scented, but underneath the rose is this unbearable stench. And she leans in just centimeters away from kissing him when all of a sudden, bang! The doors at the back of the hallway open, and completely enshrouded in shadow is Count Dracula. And his voice booms across the hallway. "What are you doing?" And within the blink of an eye, lightning fast, he suddenly appears in the middle of the hallway, faster than anyone can ever move. And immediately the three women scatter. They just go around the hallway and they say, "Sss," and they seem to hiss and recoil, and all their loveliness is gone. And Dracula comes up to Jonathan Harker and examines him closely and finds him untouched. And Jonathan Harker is fainting at this point. He's starting to go in and out of consciousness. This ordeal is almost too much for his brain to handle right now, on top of his exhaustion. And the last thing he remembers is Dracula saying, "No one touches this one. He is mine until I am done with him. But when I am done, you may have him. Until then." And Jonathan Harker remembers Dracula throwing a bag to the three women. And inside the bag, there seemed to be movement, as if there was something alive and whimpering. And then he hears the three women cackle joyfully, and he passes out completely. And he wakes up the next day, well, I should say the next late day, towards dinner time, and he's back in his room. And he looks around and he sort of gets up, and all of his stuff is there. And it's like nothing had ever happened. And he goes out to the main room where all the food usually is, and there's food. So he eats a dinner by himself. And then Dracula shows up for his evening English classes. And Jonathan Harker sort of sits with him and says, do you remember anything from last night, you know? And Dracula shakes his head and says, no, why would I? Jonathan Harker says, no reason, I just had a really weird dream and you were in it. Dracula says, I cannot account for a foreigner's dreams. And then Jonathan gets an idea and he says, can I write a letter? I think I have a fiance, her name is Mina. I think she's missing me. Also want to report back how the job is going. You know, I think you're really happy with the real estate in London. And I know you're really liking learning English, but I've got people back home who are worrying about me. And then Dracula says, of course, you may write letters. But I think that you should send them by July 18th. I think after that, there will be no more chance to send letters out. And then Dracula smiles, a big smile, and Jonathan gets the feeling, the obvious feeling, that they may be the last day he's alive. So Jonathan quickly sketches out some letters. And this is something I've been forgetting to say. But Jonathan Harker knows shorthand, which is a way of writing very quickly. It almost looks like code. So instead of writing A, B, C, D, like a normal alphabet, there are like lines and dashes that you can use. And it allows people to write really quickly. In the olden days, people who needed to take down what people are saying, such as like in a courtroom, where you need to have a record of what was said, and you can't follow people because people are speaking too fast, shorthand was invented as like essentially code to be able to write extraordinarily quickly. So Jonathan Harker has begun to write in his journal, which is where we're learning about all these experiences that he's having. He's starting to write in shorthand, because he's scared if Dracula found his journal pages and talked about his crazy like wall climbing techniques and things, and these creepy women who are just sketchily in the hallway late at night trying to kiss him and maybe do something evil, like murder him, it felt. Jonathan Harker thinks that shorthand is a good way to go when writing these letters. So he writes them quickly in shorthand and then seals them. And then gives them to Dracula and says, oh yeah, could you just send this to Mina and my boss? When secretly Jonathan Harker inside the letters is, saying, help me, save me. And Dracula says, of course, I'll send them. And then he leaves. Well, the next day, Jonathan Harker receives the letters back and they've been opened. And Dracula says, I'm sorry, I was not able to send these letters. A servant opened them and they were uncomfortable sending them. We just want to make sure that Transylvania has a good reputation. If you could please rewrite them. And that's when Jonathan Harker knew that no letters were going to be able to make it out of here. That gave any indication that he needed help. So that idea was scratched. So it was back to the escape through the balcony idea. And the closer and closer July 18th got, the more Jonathan Harker started to get desperate. He started doing this every night. After Dracula would finish English classes, he would go to the balcony and climb down the wall really scarily, and Jonathan Harker would then scale his wall towards Dracula's balcony. He started to get better and better at it. His muscles started to get used to the exertion. And every time he went into the room, he did glance at the gold because it was just such a huge pile of gold that wasn't being used. It just blew his mind. And he got better at exploring the castle, but he never went back towards that one creepy hallway ever again. Until one night, Dracula just didn't show up for English classes. And this time when Jonathan Harker climbed down to Dracula's balcony, he was scared that Dracula would be in bed. But he peeked in through the balcony window and Dracula wasn't there. So he figured that he must be completely out of the castle. But as he was exploring, he went towards the basement of the castle. Jonathan Harker had never explored down here before. And when he got there, he found, and this is going to sound super weird, but it was like a graveyard in the basement. He descended some stone steps and there was dirt on the ground and all of these gravestones and this creepy fog. And in the middle of this basement room, which was quite large and almost had like that dark spiked fence around the edges, around the stone wall, almost as if someone had built this graveyard in the basement of this creepy castle. And Jonathan Harker just can't believe the eerie weirdness of this place. But something compels him to go towards the center of the graveyard. And at the heart of that graveyard is a giant white sepulcher, a huge crypt. So it's almost like a building. And there's an entrance to this creepy crypt. And Jonathan Harker steps inside. And moonlight is somehow making its way through the top of the crypt. There must be slits in the roof. And inside is a coffin. A dark oak wooden coffin that looks like it has been recently opened and closed. There's no dust on this thing. And what's even stranger is there are similar coffins all around this sepulcher. Jonathan Harker opens one, and they're filled with dirt. They're filled with dirt. Like the creepy, gross, dark dirt. And he steps outside the sepulcher and looks around real quick, and yes, there has been someone who has been digging up the graveyard. And Jonathan Harker remembers that a couple days back, there had been visitors to the castle. He just hadn't really gotten a good look at them, but they looked like locals. They looked like Transylvanian villagers. And he didn't think much of it because they were really too far. When he tried to shout at them, they didn't seem to hear him, or maybe they were just ignoring him. But they must have been digging this creepy graveyard and putting this dirt into these random coffins. But the center coffin in the sepulcher seemed different. And a feeling of dread grips Jonathan Harker. And he has this really strong aversion to opening that giant coffin. But then he thinks, based on all of my experiences here and all of the things I felt averse or drawn towards, I have a feeling that as much as I hate it, I need to open this coffin. So he grabs a shovel off of the ground that maybe had been used to dig up some of this dirt coffin things, and he opens up the center coffin, and laying inside with his hands crossed is none other than Count Dracula. His face is completely changed. The man looks 40 years younger, and his face almost seems bloated, like a puffer fish, and there seems to be like a peakish hue to it, as if he's been, weirdly to say, but almost like engorged with liquid that's rosy. And he just looks full of vitality and life, but he still has that creepy pale exterior and weird, swept back hair. But he looks like a middle-aged man instead of an old man now. And it freaks out Jonathan Harker so much, and he's so disgusted with his host, and he just feels that no normal man, this cannot be a man, would be lying inside a coffin, so he decides to kill him. He raises the shovel and brings it down as hard as he can onto Dracula's head, and it cuts open Dracula's forehead, and Dracula wakes up. His eyes burn open, and they are blood red, and his mouth opens in a horrible snarl, white teeth sharp, almost seeming to grow, and he screams at Jonathan Harker. And Jonathan Harker falls backward in fright, and as he falls, his hand reaches out, grabs the edge of the coffin lid, and shuts it. just as Dracula was rising up. And then there's silence. And Jonathan Harker starts to breathe really hard. And then he hears footsteps. And he hears a foreign language. And there are several people, and it's the voices of men. And he realizes that it may be the same villagers who dug up all the dirt, that they're coming back. And he has no idea what they want, but he's got to get out of there. So he runs a little bit towards their voices because he realizes that they might know the exit of the castle, and where they're coming from is probably closer where the exit of the castle is. And he hides at the wall as he sees a group of men wearing very grimy, gross clothes, some of them carrying shovels, and some of them carrying like handholds, almost as if they need to be carrying heavy objects. And they pass him. And he darts away past where they just walked, and he finds the exit of the castle. And he pushes open the giant oak door, and he runs out, screaming into the night like a madman. And in the darkness, wolves